Well, good morning. How are we doing today? Good, good, good. Hey, anybody know what this is? I'm trying to help you out today, all right? How many of you have never used a map in your life? Raise your hand for me. I want you to look around at these people, all right? Because that's a fairly modern invention, isn't it? How many of you, the height of going on a summer vacation was getting one of these out and mapping out the course? Anybody else there with me? How many of you consider yourself the master of the map in your family? Anybody else? All right, right? There's just something about feeling like you got it under control, right? Going 65 miles an hour down the road. I wanted to make sure I got the right speed limit. 65 miles an hour down the road, you know, and you're looking and you're telling your spouse, I'm right here on the map. I don't have to look at it. I know exactly where we're at. Anybody else say, you know, I got this figured out. I know where we're going. Let me have the map. And I can use this to find a shortcut because there's nothing better than finding a, because you're the man or you're the woman, whichever way it works for you, right? To find those shortcuts. And you feel good about it, right? But nobody uses these things anymore, right? We get our phones, we listen to Siri or some other voice tell us, in 2 blocks, turn right. Lori and I were going down to a Nationals game the other day, first time we drove down there. Had bought an online pass for a parking spot and put it in my phone. We're going along, we're fine. We must have gone past that place where we should have turned about 3 times. Because I was following the directions, you know. We got down, we were a long ways away, we came back around. Half street was really literally a half street because the other half was way over there someplace, you know. It was crazy. Finally, it was like, I know exactly where it's at. We're not worrying about the turn off the phone. We're just going to get there, you know. But there's something about it. And here's the truth. There is always a shortcut, isn't there? And for some of us, it's the thing that we love. We love the shortcut. We love, you know, for us, getting a great bargain, you know, shortcutting the system, figuring ways around, finding a bargain. Anybody have the bargain hunters out there? You know, you feel really good about that, don't you? I made the shortcut. I got before everybody else. I got the deal. I got all that stuff. And shortcuts are these great things. For some of us, they're the things that drive us. But there's a second side to shortcuts, a flip side, if you will. And that's that shortcuts aren't always the best way to go. I don't know about you. I don't want a surgeon who's working on me saying, you know, this is how we should be doing it, but I got the shortcut kind of figured out, you know, and I'm just going to get in there and, you know, nobody else wants it. Or you don't want an auto mechanic who's in there working on, and you come back and you see this pile of parts left over, and they're not parts he replaced. They're just extra, yeah, you know. And you kind of go, you know, and shortcuts are not the kind of thing. And here's the interesting thing for us. I can understand the desire to find a shortcut. Saves you time, saves you energy. But I'm guessing most, if not all of us in this room this morning have experienced the cost of taking a shortcut and how it impacted us. Could be in our pocketbook. I have learned, though I continue to struggle, if I'm honest, I have learned, but I have continued to struggle with the idea that getting the cheapest thing is not always the best idea. You know, I've had to bump up and spend a little more because it pays off, right? You get what you pay for, and oftentimes you buy the cheapest thing, and you literally get what you paid for, you know, and then you go back buying another one. So the shortcut isn't always the best thing. But here's the question that underlines those big shortcuts in our lives. Those areas in our lives where we're tempted to sort of shortcut things. You know, you're in school, and it's the finals are coming up. How many of you have finals coming up the next couple weeks? Yeah, everybody else ought to be going, aw, too bad, right? You know, those are way in the rearview mirror, but for you, we're sorry that you have to go through that. But there's that temptation. I got to pass the finals, right? You know, and you're studying, and then everybody's got their method of how you keep the information in there. Some people actually write it on their bodies. Or kind of peek over at somebody else's thing, you know, because it's not that you don't know it, it's just that right at the moment you don't remember that you knew it. But, there's little help. And, you know, these shortcuts, and we have so many shortcuts in life. And it's really the question of, do I want to pay the price to do the things the right way? Because there's this cost. There's a cost to doing things the right way, but there's a much greater cost when we don't do things the right way. Even when we get what we wanted. Even when we get the good thing, the thing that we think God wants for us. It's that cost to us. The cost that maybe nobody else around us sees or recognizes. That cost to our personal integrity, our personal sense of values, our personal reputation. And today and next week, we're going to look at this idea of shortcuts. Today, we're going to look at a sort of a negative story, one that kind of is one of those teach you a lesson when you make a shortcut, not good things happen. Next week, we're going to look at a positive one. But today, we're going to be at a bit of it. But here's the reality, as I think about it, when we look at shortcuts, the reality is this: when we're faced with a shortcut, and the reason sometimes we sort of short-circuit our path with God, here's His plan for us, and I like His plan, but I'm not sure I want to wait for His plan to get to where He wants it. As a shortcut. Here's the things that happen to us when we're faced with a shortcut and the temptation to, do I go that way? Or do I pay the price to go the long way? And the reality is this: when we're faced with those things, we really don't trust or believe God. I mean, that's what it's core, right? Oh, yes, I believe God. We sing our songs. I trust God. I'm all in it. Then this week you go, yeah, but. And everybody's got a yeah, but. And those yeah, buts turn into doubts. It makes us question. It makes us tempted to take those shortcuts. Another reason we look at shortcuts is we're greedy. Maybe you're not greedy. Maybe it's just me. But I'm guessing for a lot of us, we want what we want when we want it, which happens to be right now, or actually about 5 seconds ago, because now is already 5 seconds past that, right? The other reality for us is this: we're short-sighted. Because how many of you could tell stories about the time you took the shortcut, you sort of took the easy way, took the path of least resistance, took the quicker way that you knew was going to have a cost to it, but you wanted to get done with it versus paying the bigger cost over here? And in that short-sightedness, you've recognized how much you've missed what God really had for you. And in our short-sightedness, we see the immediate, and we forget this long-term payoff. There's a quote that's on your outline. I don't know where I saw it at, but it says this: the decisions you make today decide the stories you tell tomorrow. And that's a heavy statement when you really think about it. And it puts a lot of weight on all of us. But it's a very true statement. The decisions you make today really will determine this and decide the stories that you tell tomorrow. And this morning as we begin, I simply want to ask that question: what story do you want to tell tomorrow? And when I say tomorrow, I don't necessarily mean tomorrow 24 hours from now. I mean tomorrow, next week, 6 months from now, 5 years from now. What's the story you want to be able to tell your kids or your grandkids? Or that bratty neighbor kid that you just know needs that lesson and that story from your life, you know? But I want you to feel the weight of that statement for just a moment. The decisions that you make today decide the stories that you tell tomorrow. And I want you to feel the weight of that, because our story today is all about that. About a decision made one day that is the story that we tell even today, thousands of years later. But before we go there, I want to ask you just to bow your heads and let's pray one more time together, okay? Father, sometimes it's just easier, and sometimes I don't want to think about it. I just want to make the decision and get on with my life and enjoy life, and I don't always see below the surface. I confess that I don't always see the long picture. Because sometimes just that situation is so demanding, the pain just seems so unbearable. The frustration level is beyond what I can handle any longer. And I just want to do something. I want to get out. I want to change things. I want to fix things. I want things to be done so I don't have to bear that weight. But I'm thankful again this morning that you are a loving God and an extremely patient God. And I pray this morning that your patience would continue in each of our lives. And that you would speak into us whatever it is that we need to hear on this day, in this place, and at this time in our lives. And I thank you for that. In your Son's name, amen. If you want to follow me, we're over in 1 Samuel 13. And it's the story, one of the multiple stories in the Bible about a guy named Saul. And Saul was anybody know this is Old Testament Saul, not New Testament Saul. Saul in the Old Testament was the first, man, you got a bright group today, first king of Israel, that's right. And if you remember much about the backstory there, the backstory is God said, you don't need a king. You know, we're going to have this other kind of relationship here. We'll have a prophet that kind of guides things. You know, people will share responsibilities. We'll have a leader, but we won't really have a king. And they said, no, we really want a king. And God said, okay, if you want a king, but it's not going to go so good. And Saul is the prime example, number one example, because he's first number one king of why this wasn't such a good idea. But let me cut to the chase. Let me give you what you should never do when you're telling a story. And that's the punchline at the start, all right? You know, you can tell the story, Oz, and you go, and the moral of the story is, you know, it's a nice tie. I'm going to tie everything up at the start. Here's the moral of the story. There is more at stake than what's in front of me. I want you to say that with me. There is more at stake than... There's more at than... Right? You need to be convinced of that. Because I need to be convinced of that. Because it's my perception that most of us just live life. For some of us, it's all we seem like we can do. You know, we're just trying to keep our head above water. We're just trying to breathe. We're just trying to make it to the next paycheck. We're just trying to make it to the next day. We're just trying, and we don't always see that what's at stake isn't just what's in front of me. But as oftentimes, and dare I say almost all the time, more than what we see. Because it's easy for us. And if you're not a believer today, you're not a follower of Jesus, this may not make a lot of sense to you. And if you're kind of struggling with this or just kind of starting this whole process or even been in it a while but haven't really considered this, one of the things that we sometimes forget as followers of Jesus, as believers in God, is this idea that there's a God and there's another being out there called the devil. And they are literally fighting over the person who happens to be sitting exactly, you ready for this? Where you're sitting today. You're the prime property they're fighting over. And that may help explain a lot of the things that go on in your life. And again, if you're a guest here today, maybe you're here for one of our baptisms and you just showed up because you're a friend of the family and you're thinking, oh great, here he goes, devil talk, all this kind of stuff. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm not looking for a devil behind every little thing. I'm just telling you, you are valuable property. You are the most valuable property in the whole universe. And there's this constant battle, and at times you recognize that battle, but more times than not, if you're like me, you don't, because life is happening. And I don't stop to consider the greater things here. I'm just trying to get through this day. I'm just trying to fix this problem. I'm just trying to answer that, take care of that, and you get it stretched out. And for Saul, you'll see as we read through these passages just how much there was more at stake than what was in front of him. So let's pick it up. We're going to pick it up in verse 2. And begins by saying, listen, Saul selected 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel, and he sends the rest of the guys home. So he takes 3,000 and says, I don't know how many more he had, but he says, guys, this is all I need, 3,000. Now at this time, the Philistines, how many of you know about the Philistines? Good guys or bad guys? Everybody go boo, hiss. Yeah, bad guys. In fact, they are the quintessential bad guys in the Old Testament time. When the children of Israel were around, they were the bad guys, always the bad guys. And at this moment, they are sort of in control of things. They have dominated. In fact, they have taken away all of the spears and swords that the Israelites had. In fact, in the story, it'll say the only people that have swords are Jonathan, who is Saul's son, and Saul. Everybody else, they got shovels. I'm not sure about you, not a great battle idea. Sword, spear, shovel. Just dig my own grave kind of thing. You know, it's a bad situation. They were overpowered. But Israel wants to break free, and so this is kind of the setting. He says, hey, I'm going to take 3,000 troops. And it goes on to say he took 2,000 of them, and they go to this place called Michmash, which is a great name. Anybody need a name for your kid? Name him Michmash, all right? The other 1,000 went with Saul's son Jonathan to Gibeah. So 1,000 go over here, 2,000 go over here, and they're hanging out. And then what happens in the story is that Jonathan decides he's going to attack this little Philistine outpost. And he attacks it, and they beat up the guys, they kill some guys, and they have this little victory, woo, because it's not a big victory, it's a little victory, woo, it's a little victory, But word gets back to Saul that this has happened, and Saul goes, uh-oh, because again, they're not in an equal position, they're not in a greater position, they're in a smaller position. And so, he says, tell everybody around here, tell all the Israelites this is what happens, because they need to know that Jonathan attacked a few of them, and they're all ticked off right now, and they're coming to get us. And here's what happened, it says, the Philistines mustered a mighty army of 3,000 chariots. Now, how many guys did Saul and Jonathan have? 3,000, right? So they have as many chariots as they have soldiers, plus 6,000 charioteers. Those are people riding. And as many warriors, I love this, as the grains of the sand on the seashore. Talk about an exact count of people, right? It's one of those hyperboles, that just says, there's a whole mess of them, and there's too many count. Nobody's going, 1, 2, 3. Oh, man, I got to start again. 1, 2, it's not that kind of, they're just a whole mess. There are so many that the 3,000 doesn't look like 3,000 anymore. It looks like 3,000 because there's just a mess of them, right? It says, when the men of Israel saw the vast number of enemy troops, they lost their nerve entirely. Which I think is an understatement, right? There's as many as the seashore, which means all you can see is people. And you go, to which they did, which a lot of us would do. They tried to hide in caves and holes and rocks and tombs and cisterns. They're finding any place they can hide. They're finding, I'll hide over here, Maybe they won't see me. It's that kind of, they're afraid. This is the whole mess of them. Not very many. This does not look good. In fact, it says that some of them crossed the Jordan River and escaped into the land of Gad and Gilead. They go to another foreign country. They just say, I'm out of here, I'm going to Canada. They rip my card, I'm getting out of here, I'm going to be safe. So that's the scene. Saul's army is disintegrating, and they're facing this huge foe. And it says, meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and his men were trembling with fear. Which has got to be a confidence builder if you're a leader, right? You look around, everybody's, that whole kind of stuff. And Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel. Now, Samuel was the prophet, the main prophet in Israel right now. He's the guy that God spoke through the most. He was sort of God's messenger to the king and to the leaders of Israel. And so Saul waits 7 days for Samuel. As Samuel had instructed him, or apparently Samuel said, listen, I heard you guys are gathering for war. Give me 7 days. I'll be out there. We'll take care of business, because there's this whole process that God had set up. Anytime before you go fight a war, some of you may remember this, before you go fight a war, you got to make sure that you ask me to be with you, to me to bless you. Don't just run out there and assume that I'm going to be with you. Stop, recognize me, look for my leading, because this may not be the right time for a battle. This may be the right time for battle. But if I'm with you, you're going to wipe everybody out. Doesn't matter how big or small you are. Trust me on this. So that's kind of the story. So he's waiting for Samuel to show up, as he instructed him. And it says there, Samuel still didn't come. 7 days, Saul waiting. Now, they didn't have watches back then. They weren't to the second or something like that, but he's waiting. 7 days, what's going on? And in fact, as he's waiting, he realizes that his troops are rapidly slipping away. So he started with 2,000. We already know some were hiding out. Some are running away. We don't know how many are at this point, but it's got to be less than 2,000. And now some more are slipping away. So Saul does what is so often happens to us. We get in a hard situation. Something has to be done. We've been waiting for an answer, waiting for a response, but it doesn't even happen. Somebody's got to do something. They look to you because you're the one that's supposed to do it. So Saul says, bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings, because I got to ask God. So bring the stuff out, I'll take care of it. I've watched Samuel do this enough times. It's not that hard. He's a pastor. He works 1 day a week. How hard is this, right? And Saul sacrificed the burnt offering himself. Thank you for a couple of moans, because that's really the response you're supposed to have. In that setting, that would have been a, oh, no moment, all right? It's a bad thing. That's the priest's job. You don't go touch the priest stuff, because that's all holy business. And if you get your hands messed up in that normally doesn't always go so good, so just kind of leave it. But Saul has to do something. At the moment, he sacrifices the burnt offering himself. And just as Saul was finishing, so I don't know how close that timeline of 7 days was, but it's apparently pretty close. As he's finishing, Samuel arrives. Dun, da, da, da. And I love what Saul does. Saul went out to meet and welcome him. Hey, Sam, how you doing, Good to see you, But Samuel already, I don't know whether he smelled the burnt offering going on, or he's just kind of seen what's going on. He simply says, Saul, what in the world have you done? What are you doing? Why would you do that? You know the process. You know the thing that God has kind of laid out, how this needs to go. You know who needs to do what. This is all very important. This is all very strict. Why would you do that? And here's what Saul says. I saw my men scattering from me. I mean, they're running away, Samuel. And you didn't arrive on time, right? You didn't arrive when you said you would. You ever say that to somebody? If you'd shown up, it wouldn't have been this way, but somebody had to do something. And the Philistines are at Michmash, ready for a battle. They're ready. We had to get ready. My guys are leaving, and you didn't show up. They're ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked the Lord. That's what I said to myself. Let me explain, Samuel, why this happened this way. I was logical about this. I stopped. Read a piece of the Bible in the morning, said some kind of prayer before I rushed off to the office, because that's what I'm supposed to do. I said to myself, the Philistines are ready to march against us, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help, because I want the Lord's help. I want to do it His way. You didn't show up. My guys are running away. They're ready, so I got to do something. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came. Felt compelled. And isn't that the same feeling you get when you're in one of those moments? Do I take the shortcut? Do I go the longer route? Do I get it done and get it over with? Or do I hang in there and follow the process? Felt compelled. What else could I do, Samuel? To which Samuel says, how foolish. Or how foolish. I don't know which way it went. I don't know whether it's a sad foolish, a reprimanding foolish. But it's foolish, he says. How foolish. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God that He gave you. The command's very simple. It's very straightforward, Saul. This is the process, and you didn't keep it. You thought what was at stake was right in front of you. You thought what was at stake was this battle, but it's more than a battle. Had you kept it, that is the command of God. If you followed through the way God had laid things out, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. I mean, Saul, if you had just hung in there, God would have taken care of this. And would have taken care of you. Forever. You would have been the man. You would have been George Washington of Israel before George Washington was of the USA, right? But now, your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after His own heart. There was the shortcut. There was the moment to go. And all you saw at stake was what was happening. You got to get ready for the battle. The battle, I'm losing guys. You haven't shown up. I got to get something done. I got to get something done. And in short-circuiting what God had wanted him to do, he literally threw away Not just his future, but his family's future. Because God was after a man, a woman, a person after his own heart. You didn't follow through, Saul. You didn't do what God had kind of laid out this plan he had for you. And we can look at that and say, but it kind of makes sense. I mean, he was stuck in a tough spot. But everybody in this room has been stuck in a tough spot. And it's at those moments of that tough spot that all of us have to make that decision. This way, this way, this way, this way. And we go through all those questions. I thought to myself, and I said this, and I felt compelled that I got to do something. And I love this last few words because this tells us that this wasn't just about God saying, these are the commands, obey everything, because I'm after somebody who will just simply obey everything. Just follow the order, just follow the steps, just do all that. That was not what God was after. God was after somebody who was after God's heart. And what that means is that he was after a person or people who would be obedient to him or loyal to him, but not out of because I'm obedient or loyal to you, but because I'm after something greater. I'm after God. And I'm after what God means, not just what he'll do. See, the greatest consequence is we miss the possibility of relying fully on God when we take a shortcut. We miss that possibility of relying fully on God. And not only that, watch this. And what he could have done if we had. And isn't that the truth of the story of our lives? I guess all of us probably have a story, at least one. Some of us have a bunch. I've talked to some of you. Some of you got a lot. I mean, you guys got a book full of these stories, right? If only. If I just had. And the sad thing about that, for me, is that when we fail to rely upon God, we lose out to ever know what he would have done. Because there's not that opportunity longer. And we miss out the opportunity to say, God, if we are following God, if we're kind of doing the best to follow what we think is his plan, and we're kind of in that mode where we've been, following him, trying to be obedient to him, trying to be responsive to him, we find ourselves in a situation, we miss out on the possibility to say to God, you got me in this situation, now you have to get me out. Because when we short circuit it, we say either you got me into this or I got me into it, I don't care, I'm getting me out. Because somebody's got to do something. And the truth is, everybody in this room is in one of three places right at this moment. You're either sitting there thinking, Mike, how did you know this stuff? How do you know that's going on in my life? And I'm going to give you a little insight. You know how I know? You are not that special. And I say that in the most thoughtful, caring way I can, all right? But it's a pretty common thing for all of us. This is not, you're unique, you're the only one going through this. I mean, the Bible is full. We could literally make this a long series. I'm only here for a couple weeks, and this summer gets crazy. I'm gone, I'm back, I'm gone, I'm back. So this was a 2 week, so I had to pick 2 stories. So this is the negative, next week a positive one. But there are lots of stories. And it is true for you, and it's true for people sitting around you. To have those moments when God's best is laid out, but the shortcut is laid out as well. And it's so much tempting to take the shortcut, to take the quick fix. If you're not in that first category, you may be sitting there as that's an interesting kind of moment. That's interesting, that idea. And the reality is that someplace in the next few months, if not next few weeks, you're going to go, oh, I remember that guy at that church talking about that short circuit stuff and shortcut stuff. Or you're sitting there thinking to yourself right now, well, how come you didn't tell me this 6 months ago or a year ago, right? Because something has happened in your life, something huge and big. And you're sitting there this morning saying, I wish I could go back. I literally wish I could have a time machine, step into it, hit the button, zzz, go back, and take the long route, take the process, and I'm not going to short circuit what God's trying to do. I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to persevere through it. I'm going to hang on because at this moment I know the cost of not doing that. And if you're in that situation, I hate to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. I invite you to come back next week, all right? Because next week we're looking at a positive story, okay? And I want you to have a positive story. Yeah, it's good news, yeah. But here's the thing I want to finish on today. All of us have things in our lives that if we could, we would go back and change. We would make a different choice. We would choose a different response. And sometimes we feel the weight of that, and we think because of that, that's how it's going to be forever. And I ran across this great statement from this guy, Dan Gilbert. Any of you familiar with Dan Gilbert? Yeah, he's a smart guy. I've heard him at a couple of conferences. Just a smart guy from Harvard. I don't know what else he does. Harvard, after his name, I thought, okay, he's smart. That's all I needed. But I love what he said. Human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. And I love that. Because all of us are tempted at times to think we're finished. That what is done, that who I am is what it's going to be, that there is no hope because I've already messed up, screwed up, piled up too much stuff in my life, and this is what it's going to be. And a very smart guy agrees with the Bible here that you are not finished. And not get sucked into that belief that what is and what's always going to have to be. Because there is always hope as long as you have breath. Because as we sang earlier, we serve a mighty and awesome God. You want to know how awesome this God is? Saul, the story goes on. Let's go back to the story for a second. Saul, when he does a head count after meeting with Samuel and after getting chewed out and all that stuff, do you know how many people he has left? 600. Remember again, the Philistines have 3,000 chariots, right? 6,000 charioteers, and people as much as the... And Saul, they go out to meet him because Philistines are waiting for an army to show up. 600 of them show up and they go, I thought the army was showing up. Maybe this is just an early group. They're coming out just to scout things out. The story goes on. Jonathan goes and attacks this thing by himself. Do you know that they won that battle? They short-circuited God's plan for them. They didn't do it God's way, and it cost Saul hugely. I mean, the rest of his story, if you read through the Bible, I mean, it's a sad story. He stayed king for a number of years after this, but it's this process that he knows at some point it's going away. He was on the throne, but he didn't have the throne. But God stepped in that day and gave victory to somebody who had shortcut, who had taken the shortcut, who had short-circuited his plan. Because God recognizes more than what we see in front of us as well, that there's more at stake. So don't ever think that because you've messed up, that God just chucks you to the curb. Because God will even step up for you at those occasions.